4 minutes on the do now. Shout out to Eddie for texting me his technical issues while we are getting everything figured out. Four minutes left on the do now. Two and a half minutes. One more minute. If you are finished with your do now, now is a good time to get notes ready and also your resources pulled up for our oral drill quiz. Not a quiz, just our oral drill. Sorry, just misspeaking. Okay, go ahead and finish up your answer. That was the timer. Okay. Great. Okay, like usual, I'm going to be calling out. Let me pull up the oral drill quiz so I can share my screen and we can go over why the answers are the right answers. Okay, number 1. Which of the following events in the late 19th and early 20th centuries resulted from the idea described in the passage above? Niasia.
The answer is B.
And why is it B?
I said D.
Oh, D, sorry. And why is it D?
It's D. B. Hold on. It says that overseas markets for American goods might relieve the problem of underconsumption at home.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
What is number 2, Naziah?
Number 2 is D, because they were mostly expanding because they had to expand for their agriculture, and agriculture was growing in the South, so they wanted to expand westwards to make more products.
Beautiful. Okay, number 3. What is the correct answer, Isis?
Well, I picked the wrong one for this one. At first I had A, but then I changed it to C.
And why do you think C is the correct answer now that you've seen it?
Because American Indians were they had the Indian Removal Act, right? And then they had the Dow's Act and stuff where they like pushed off their land. So they had more higher levels of whatever that is.
Great. And what is the answer for number 4, Ariana?
I wasn't quite sure. I skipped it, but I had to guess. I'll say, is it? Would it be B?
Somebody jump in, raise your hand if you can help Ariana with number 4. Who saw the correct answer for number 4? Naisha, go for it.
The answer is D.
Can you explain that, please?
The answer is D because due to the shift from farming to industrialization, America needed to expand more to get more resources for their new economy base.
Beautiful. And what is the answer to number 5, Dwayne?
The answer is A.
Mm-hmm.
Because like whatever excerpt basically saying, like, I don't know how to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
I told my situation.
Madison, go ahead and jump in and help Dwayne out.
Can you go to the passage for me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. So the passage says, I remember the wire fence encircling us and all that, And it says it was because I had Japanese ancestors. And if I remember correctly, I remember we learned about Japanese internment camps where they were forced, basically like the Holocaust, just because they were Japanese. So I picked that.
Beautiful. Great. We're going to go ahead and go into a very quick oral drill where you have your resources available to help you out. Again, you don't have to get the answer perfectly correct. You just need to be prepared to answer, so that way I can give you the cold call points. What is the Reconstruction period, Janaya? The Reconstruction period.
It was when they tried to put together.
Going in the right direction.
I forgot. They were trying to like use agriculture for something.
Go ahead and hop in, Cedric.
The Reconstruction, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a time after the Civil War, and let me see. It was the North. They sent troops down to the South to keep track of them or something like that, to make sure they joined the states again. And then, yeah, that's it. When they took them out, then the Reconstruction era ended.
Beautiful. Do you remember what that was when they took the troops out? What we call that?
End of the Reconstruction?
Yes, Madison?
The Compromise of 1877, 70. It was what Hayes' presidency.
77. Beautiful. Great. What is imperialism? Imperialism. Erica.
Imperialism is when a country tries to take over another country and use it for its natural resources.
Beautiful. An example of American imperialism is the Spanish-American War. What happened in the Spanish-American War, Jade?
In the Spanish-American War, they fought over Texas land, right?
That's the Mexican-American War.
Oh, hold on. Spanish-American War. Let's see. Oh, it ended Spanish colonial rule in America, and it resulted in U.S. getting territories in the Western Pacific and Latin America.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Another example of American imperialism is the annexation of Hawaii. Why is Hawaii important, Janiqua?
You said Hawaii?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the place where like the Dole brothers went and they took over in order to like get like pineapple and all that type of stuff?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay. What is manifest destiny? Manifest destiny, Eddie.
When they believe they had the God-given right to expand west.
Beautiful. You might need to use your resources for this one. What is the Dawes Act? What's important about the Dawes Act? Ziara.
The Dawes Act was
Okay, I'm gonna jump down to Ariana. Be prepared to stamp whatever Ariana says. Ariana, go for it.
Wait, isn't that when they moved the Indians to like reservations and stuff? Yeah.
That's what changes the American reservation system. Ziara, go ahead and stamp that for me. What is the Dawes Act?
Is when they moved Indians for reservations.
Beautiful. Okay, and finally, Who is William McKinley? What's important about his presidency? Kamisha.
I'm really not sure.
If you look on your period 6 reference sheet, he should be there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Isis, and then Kamisha, I'll have you stamp whatever Isis says.
William McKinley. He was the president, and he led he led America to victory in the Spanish-American War.
Beautiful. Kamisha, go ahead and stamp that for us.
She said something about him leading Americans during the Spanish-American War.
Absolutely. Awesome job, you guys. That finishes up our oral drill and our do now. Now I have a couple of announcements. So first, tomorrow we are going to be doing a practice DBQ for the AP exam. And I did all this oral drill on purpose because I'll go ahead and let you know so you can be prepared. The DBQ will be on American imperialism with things like the Spanish-American War and Hawaii and all that good stuff. So obviously when you take the AP exam, you're not going to know what the essay is going to be on. The goal of the DBQ tomorrow is for me to see what we need to fix over the next 2 weeks. The exam is 2 weeks from Friday. And so I know that DBQs are hard and you're going to be getting a lot of DBQs over the next couple weeks, but know it so that way we can make sure that 1, you're reviewing the content and the material, and 2, so that way I can try to see what we can fix in the next 2 weeks, whether it be outside evidence, working on our theses, our context statements, using since statements. It's all about practice, especially with this new time period of 45 minutes instead of an hour. So that is why we are doing it. Tomorrow, the DBQ will be graded basically 50-50. 50% of your grade is going to be effort. Did you show up? And did you, I'm sorry, my cats are freaking out. The grade is going to be basically 50%. Did you show up to the Zoom? Did you do it? And did you try? And then like the other 50% is going to be me going through and grading it like a normal DBQ and making sure that you guys get a decent thesis and a context statement. So even if you're awful at DBQs and you only know how to write a thesis, you're still going to be able to pass this DBQ really, really easily. So like I said, 50% effort, showing up and doing the thing, 50% how well you do. Remember, for this DBQ, you don't even need to argue with 4 of the documents to get a point. You literally just need to describe 2 documents. You don't even need to make an argument about it. So everybody is super capable of doing really, really well on this exam. There are going to be a lot of DBQs over the next 2 weeks. It's not like there's going to be a DBQ every day, but there are going to be a lot of DBQs. And again, this is to practice and to make sure that we are getting into that 45-minute time period, because that is definitely our biggest struggle, is doing all of this stuff in that 45 minutes. The next thing, let me go ahead and pull up, share my screen. The next thing that you guys need to be aware of is on Friday, we are still having APUSH. On Friday, we are still having APUSH. You are still getting a grade for being here from 10 to 10:50 for part of your Zoom quiz grade. But we are going to be talking with Ms. Catlett about what these AP exams are going to be looking like and the different materials that you guys need to have ready for when we start taking these AP exams online. So not only is it going to be a part of your quiz grade for participation for Zoom, I am also going to be giving extra credit for you guys being here. So 1, it's part of a required grade, and 2, it's part of an extra credit grade to be here from 10 to 10:50 to talk to Ms. Catlett about the AP exams. So please, please, please be here on Friday. It's super important. And I would rather you guys do it during a class time of 10 to 10:50 rather than me or Ms. Catlett having to pull you during like office hours or something like that when you in theory should be done with school. So please, please, please be here from Friday to 10 to 10:50. It's going to be a combination of a class grade and extra credit. You do not want to miss it. Okay. Any questions about those two announcements? Great. Tell your friends that are not here right now to be here on Friday and to be prepared to talk about all the AP exams and to be here tomorrow for the DBQ. But like definitely tell your friends like Friday is a great opportunity to get extra credit and to also get points towards your quiz grade at the end of the week for Zoom participation. It's really important for you guys to be there. That being said, we're going to go ahead and transition and start a lecture. We're going to try to get through that pretty quickly so that way you guys can be done. So go ahead while I set up my slides, go and gather either your paper to handwrite notes or be prepared to type them. Remember, your notes are 50% of your classwork grade today. So make sure you are taking notes and are prepared to submit them. Okay, today's lecture, we are going to be doing a review of period 7, which takes place from 1890 to 1945. Go ahead and make this smaller so that way I can see. So period 7, 1890 to 1945, covers a lot of different material all the way from the Progressive Era to World War II. So let's go ahead and get started and try to get this done in the next 20 minutes so you guys can complete your exit ticket and maybe get out of here early. Okay. So the first and most important thing that really starts out this time period is the Progressive Era. And the date that we are using to focus on in terms of the Progressive Era is 1906 because it is the publishing of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, which we have talked a lot about in terms of the results of the Progressive Era. Remember, progressives are Americans who are very unhappy with the way that industrialization is changing American society. They see industrialization and the rising of the wage gap, the dismantling of labor unions, and things of that nature as being very counterproductive and very much hurting the American way of life. And so the progressives, some of the most famous being Upton Sinclair or Jane Addams, are working to fix society based on the way that industrialization is damaging it. And this creates a subsect of progressives known as the muckrakers. Now, the muckrakers, a good example of the muckrakers is Jacob Riis. He is a muckraker because he goes quite literally into the muck of industrialized society, into the urban centers where children are being forced to work in bad conditions, where you have 15 people living in 600 square feet. And they are going into the muck of society and literally raking it up to the forefront so everybody can see what kind of negative things this is doing to the negative ways that society is being affected by this. So I can write that down. One of the more famous progressive groups is the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this is one of the first national groups that is specifically run by African Americans with the goals of lifting African Americans up and trying to help them in society. Tying that back into Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, I'm sure you guys remember Sinclair's book, The Jungle, is about the meatpacking industry in Chicago or Detroit. It's one of the two. And this is where we talk about rats falling into processed meat, rat feces getting into meat, butchers not washing their hands after going to the bathroom and then handling meat. And he publishes this book called The Jungle. And President Theodore Roosevelt reads this book and is utterly like sickened. Like he is like, like he wants to vomit. He's over it. And so because of this book, Theodore Roosevelt passes the Food and Drug Act, which forces the different meatpacking industries and different other food areas to follow a certain set of laws to make sure that things are more sanitary and more safe for people to consume. So Upton Sinclair's The Jungle is a great example of the progressive movement where a muckraker brings these negative aspects to light and that turns into actual change. And this is Ida B. Wells. She is one of the leaders of the NAACP. She is also a muckraking journalist, and she specifically focuses on how lynching is destroying the lives of Southern African Americans. The next date we look at is 1917. The United States is entering World War I. Way before this, in the late 1700s and 1800s in general, the United States tries to follow George Washington's policy of isolationism. The United States should only worry about themselves. We have different aspects of that get challenged, like manifest destiny, the idea that the United States wants to spread further west and take over the continent. We also have different ways that is adjusted through things like the Monroe Doctrine, where the United States takes ownership or a protective sense of ownership over Latin America. But more than anything, the United States practices imperialism. Practices isolationism. However, and there's a fire truck outside. However, the United States must eventually changes its idea of thinking, and as the rest of the world starts to practice imperialism, which, as Erica described, is when one country invades another part of the world, usually in places like Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and they take over and these countries take over those foreign countries under the guise of we are going to spread democracy and we are going to make your lives better, but it's really to exploit national resources. So the United States involves itself with imperialism, which ends American isolationism. And one of the most famous moments of American imperialism is the Spanish-American War, where the United States fights a war with Spain and ends up getting their territories in Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. And so it is in the Spanish-American War where we really see the United States shift from isolationism to involving themselves with domestic policies. And that is best exemplified in 1917 when the United States decides to enter World War I and join the side of countries like England and France. And this is the first time that the United States is actively involved in a world conflict. There are certain moments in World War I that we should mention. The first is the one that is there is a picture of on the screen, which is the sinking of the Lusitania, which is an American ship. And it is the sinking of the Lusitania that pushes the United States to finally enter World War I. As we know, the United States is only involved in World War I until 1919. Sorry, guys, let me write down something real quick. Great. So the sinking of the Lusitania is what sends the United States into World War I. And ultimately, the United States is only in World War I for 2 years before the side of the United States and France and England wins. Why is my slides not working? Okay. And this victory in World War I leads us to the 1920s, which is a great time of progress in the United States. The reason why we have 1920 up as our date, this is when the 19th Amendment is ratified into the Constitution, which grants women the right to vote. However, what's important to know about the 1920s is that there is a lot of superficial progress that is ultimately resisted. Sorry, guys, I need to look something up real quick. And that is a great way to describe the 1920s. It is superficially beautiful and transformative, but really there's not a whole lot that is changing. So like with the 19th Amendment being passed and women being given the ability to vote, you have on the surface the creation of flappers, which are women that feel liberated from their very rigid sense of femininity, where they cut their hair short, they wear loose dresses, they no longer feel stifled by this prior idea of being a woman. And on the other side, you have women who don't want to use the right to vote. They don't think it's their place. So we see that duality. Another example of this duality is in the Great Migration. The Great Migration, in the Great Migration, we see a large influx of African Americans from the South moving into the northern cities to get jobs. African Americans feel liberated and like they're removing themselves from the Jim Crow South, where they are no longer being lynched. They are safer in the North. But when they arrive in the North, they see that they are still being discriminated against, just in different ways. They are being forced into neighborhoods that, even though there is no deliberate or on the books segregation, they are very much forced into poor Black neighborhoods. They are also forced to do the worst jobs. So while they might have jobs, they are definitely not the good ones. And so this is, again, that duality of African Americans are experiencing that liberation of leaving the South, but they are met with a harsher reality than maybe they expected. And finally, we also have the Palmer Raids. The Palmer Raids are some of the most famous moments of the first Red Scare. Remember, the Red Scare is this pushback of Americans against either immigrants or suspected communists, where they believe that communism is infiltrating the United States and they are now, and it is threatening democracy. So the Palmer Raids are targeted, superficial attacks towards suspected communists. Most of these raids had no real evidence. They were just carried out. Give you guys a couple seconds to finish that up. Does anybody have any questions on what I've talked about so far? Yes, Nyasha.
I thought that the Zimmerman telegraph is like the start of the U.S. entering World War I.
It's a part of it, but give me 2 seconds, because it is a part of it, but I think it's the sinking of the Lusitania is what actually. Okay, so the Zimmerman telegram helps push the United States towards going to war with the going to war against the Germans, but it's the sinking of the Lusitania that officially makes Americans say, okay, we're going to join them. So they're both really important in leading to the start of the American joining the World War I. Any other questions? Great. This leads us to 1929. So during the 1920s, we also have a booming economy. So while all of these societal changes are happening, while that's going on, we also have that that booming economy where everything seems to be doing really, really, really well. And a lot of this is because of the the Republican presidents during the 1920s. Republicans in this time period and still to this day believe in no regulation, which means the government does not involve itself with business whatsoever. They just let businesses do whatever they want. And so while this creates like a temporary increase in the stock market and things seem to look really, really well, because of that lack of regulation, eventually things will go badly. And things definitely went badly in 1929 in October on what we call Black Tuesday, which is the Great Stock Market Crash. The stock market crash is what begins the Great Depression. The Great Depression is the worst financial situation in American history as of now, with the way things are right now. The Great Depression disproportionately, it affects all Americans. Of course, it affects some Americans far worse, but the Great Depression is one of the few financial crashes where everybody suffered at least a little bit. Some of the more, you have farmers who are not able to produce anything, which leads to environmental disasters like the Dust Bowl. You also have the rampant increase of homelessness because people are unable to buy mortgages, which leads to the creation of what we call Hoovervilles. And they are named Hoovervilles after the current president, Herbert Hoover, for not doing anything to stop it. And so the Great Depression it affects everybody in different ways. And and then FDR is elected. Franklin Roosevelt is elected based off of his New Deal program. And the New Deal is the creation of federal jobs for American citizens to get them working and to contribute to the economy. So so while the New Deal does provide some economic aid to Americans, like the creation of the Social Security Act, most of the New Deal is targeted towards creating jobs and creating ways for Americans to make money through things like the Works Progress Administration, or the WPA. Yeah. So again, the New Deal is more about job creation than direct financial benefits, but some of those things do exist, like the Social Security Act. Great. This leads us to our last slide of the day, which is based in 1941, which is the bombing of Pearl Harbor. In Europe, Europe also suffered from a Great Depression during the 1930s. And because of this, and actually even a little bit earlier, and because of this Great Depression, German citizens were a little bit more vulnerable, and this led to the rise of power of Adolf Hitler. And during the late 1930s, Hitler is going through invading different European countries, and it's just a mess. In Europe, it's a mess. But the United States can, because we are suffering from the Great Depression, we try to keep ourselves out of it. While all of this is happening, the Japanese ally themselves with Germany in the Axis, and Germany and Italy with the Axis powers. And in December of 1941, the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, the military base in Hawaii. This is one of the darkest days in American history, and this officially leads the United States to joining the Allied powers in World War II. During World War II, we see a lot of societal change. And one of those societal changes is the Japanese internment. Through Executive Order 9066, FDR declares that all citizens of Japanese ancestry, so not just Japanese immigrants, but also the children and grandchildren of Japanese immigrants. So in theory, somebody could have been a second or third generation American and still been subject to this, are interred in internment camps along the West Coast. This is justified as a way to prevent spying in the United States, and it was considered to be a protective measure on the American side to protect themselves from possible spying, but obviously that is not the case. And it assumes that all Japanese citizens were spies. We see some other domestic shifts that are on the positive side, though. We see the creation of Rosie the Riveter and the encouragement of women to go to work during a war. And while this had been done during World War I, it is far more successful in World War II. And while women go to work in World War II, they go under the pretense that they will stay working even after the men come back from war. During World War II, we also see the creation of the Double V campaign, where African Americans wanted to use the stress of the war conflict to advocate for better liberty and better freedoms in the United States that they were fighting for in the war. But ultimately, this war ends with an atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this is what officially ends America's involvement in World War II. This is what ends the conflict between Japan and the United States. And these atomic bombs also start the new age of the Cold War. Okay, we're gonna go and stop there because I am going over time. So we're gonna stop there. I want everybody to go ahead and transition to the exit ticket and go ahead and get started on that. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we were just going to work on our exit ticket for the next 3 minutes. Sorry for taking a little bit longer on the lecture today.
Miss Barb, can I ask a question about the lecture? Because I forgot. You said, what is it? What ended what Japanese what?
The atomic bombs on the United States drops 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are 2 cities in Japan.
Oh yeah, I got that. But you said it ended something. Nothing.
It ends the conflict between Japan and the United States.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Bless.
Thank you. Yes, Sade, we're doing the exit ticket.
God bless you.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for your attention and for getting through that lecture with me. You guys are good to go ahead and hop off of Zoom. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, and be sure to be in APUSH tomorrow for the DBQ, and definitely be sure to be in APUSH on Friday. Be in APUSH on Friday. Be in APUSH on
Bye, Ms. Wad. I'm so excited to write this DBQ. Woo!
Friday.
Wait, it's not going to be the DBQ.